Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Recovery Rockstar. My name is Melinda. I am a person in recovery, and what that means to me is that I haven't had to use a mood or a mind-altering substance since December 28, 2011, and that is absolutely the victory of the people who went before me and showed me the way into not only a lifestyle of recovery, but a purpose and mission to help others who may be struggling from addiction, as well as helping family members get connected to the appropriate supports. I'm extremely grateful now. We've been doing this show we're going on a couple of years. And the people that I connect with, sometimes they're individuals that I've known for a while. Sometimes they're people I've never met. Today, I have an amazing woman I'm going to be talking to, and I do know her through the work that we do and the connections in recovery, and I'm just so excited for this show. Before I introduce her, I, as always, want to make a plug for people getting Narcan in their possession. There's a number of pilot sites. Please go to the Vermont Department of Health website to find the pilot site close to you. I also encourage people to connect with getting the harm reduction packs known as HRPs. Those include Narcan as well as other preventative information and harm reduction information. So I strongly encourage people to get those. I've been doing a number of trainings over the last couple of weeks and have distributed over 200 of these kits in our community. And I often say when people ask me, how do I know if I'm a person who should have a Narcan kit? If you leave your house, you are a person who should have a kit. If you go in public, you just never know if somebody might be struggling. And it's better to have the kit and never need it than to need it and not have it. So as always, I strongly encourage people to get kits, whether you know somebody's struggling from addiction or not, just in case you could possibly help to save a life. It's also, I want to make a little highlight that science and data shows us that people who are in recovery have the earning potential above average. The talent is above average. People who are in recovery, when they're able to shift and use all of the perseverance and resilience they did in their days of using and apply that into life today, the forces for good that we have with people working in recovery is absolutely amazing. So I just strongly encourage people to reach out if you need help, to reach out if you're a family member, a friend of somebody struggling, get more information. And I'm going to put a plug in for the Vermont Recovery Network, which I've spoken about numerous times at the beginning of the Recovery Rockstars show. If you go to the Vermont Recovery Network's website, you will get information on the 12 recovery centers across the state of Vermont. We have one in each county, which is a huge blessing for the state of Vermont. That's not the case across the United States. So we continue to be very fortunate with the talented individuals that work in the field, with the talented individuals that come forth and ask for help, and in turn become beautiful rock stars. So I am going to introduce my guest today. Absolutely excited to introduce Fawn and to be able to interview her. Hi, Fawn.
Hi, Melinda. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining this show. I have been super excited knowing this day was coming, that we were going to have an opportunity to connect. And really just for you to be able to talk a little bit about what does your life look like? What was it like? How did you get in recovery? What is your life like today? So I'm going to start with asking you, can you tell us a little bit about Fawn and your younger days?
Sure. I grew up in upstate New York in a town called Burnt Hills. It was outside of the Saratoga Springs area. So anybody familiar with the racetrack and that area of upstate New York, those were my stomping grounds. Had a beautiful home, beautiful family. Grew up in restaurants and very well. We were a family. We were a normal family. We had Sunday dinners. We did everything together. And it was a really nice way to be brought up. Lots of good memories. Youth was active around, but socially. My uncles were all products of the 70s, as was my mom. And it was before things were tainted as they were today. So my youth was amazing. My high school days were great. I was never a drinker or into a lot of substances in my younger days. It just wasn't for me. So I can say I had a pretty unremarkable bringing in that way.
So tell me a little bit about, do you remember approximately what age you were when you did start getting introduced to substances yourself? Like maybe was it a drink? Was it a substance?
Sure. My story is a little outside of the norm, but no less normal than anybody we know. We all have the same symptoms. I'm a person in long-term recovery myself. I just celebrated 5 years on the 23rd. And for me, I love the political statement of I'm a person in long-term recovery. And the fact of the matter is I'm an alcoholic. I am an alcoholic, and I loved benzos, Xanax and Klonopin were my thing. So I can say from Sunday to before, my pathway has been abstinence and complete separation from any substance of my choice. And I had a short drinking career comparatively. I hate comparing anybody in recovery, but I didn't start drinking until my later 30s. In high school, I absolutely loved marijuana. I had a chance to experiment with acid and mushrooms, and the kind of rites of passage is kind of how I look at it in the field that I'm in today. But I remember going to a party and consuming alcohol, and I didn't like that it brought me to a place where I wasn't in control. And honestly, Melinda, I can say, reflecting back now, I bet you I knew. I knew because my grandfather was an alcoholic, and some of my uncles were definitely the binge end of alcoholics. I think that was what was just enough to keep me from wanting to participate because of other issues. Like I'm a control freak. So I didn't ever drink socially until I was married, and actually going through a divorce. It would turn into kind of a girls and a mom net of, oh, we need wine. And then I had gastric bypass surgery. And I was doing something for myself, and I thought I was reclaiming my life, and I was almost 300 pounds. Food was definitely a part of my life. I have 2 children. Their early days were not easy. My son has had 2 brain tumors removed. He was diagnosed at 2 years old when I was pregnant with my daughter. And at 4 months old, we went down for a second surgery. All this time, I didn't drink or use anything. And I was married to an active alcoholic and someone who was addicted to pills. And I knew I couldn't have that out that other people were taking. So I chose my children and persevered forward. And my son is he's graduating high school this week. And my daughter is beautiful, and she's a sophomore, and just a dynamic all around athlete and musician. And just amazing kid. I have great kids. And it was because I chose early on to separate from somebody that was choosing to not even entertain or put recovery as an option on the table. And I felt like a complete hypocrite later in life, post 2012, when I had this surgery and went from nearly 300 pounds to 150 pounds and had a dynamite career. And was really, had it all with the privilege and the attitude and the entitlement. And I lost it really, really quick.
Right. It's amazing because there's a few things you said. One thing when you highlighted, it sounded like somewhat of a, eating disorder to some degree. Mm-hmm. And then it was previous to that, tinkering around with marijuana, other substances, and then knowing it's in the family. And, I often say that, many journeys I hear, even if the drug of choice came later in life, when reflecting back, there are other addictions, and it's just a matter of changing seats on the Titanic. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we choose a substance or a thing like, say, food that, it's not as common to have a fatal overdose with overeating in one simple thing, but it's still a slow way of destroying ourselves. Sometimes it's money and gambling. So we know, like,
I know I am actively in recovery, and if I get myself into a romantic relationship, there's a game changer there. And I'm thankful that with 5 years of recovery, I feel like I'm in kindergarten and just starting to learn things again. But the things that I'm able to reflect upon today and be honest with myself about, and be honest with my kids, and the people that I work with in fellowship and in recovery, are only because I've been working on myself and committed to the process. It's not just the motions, but the deeper I go, the more relief and clarity I find. And it really does bring on a sense of serenity and peace. Some people in certain programs would, acknowledge promises at this point. But there's definitely, there's a 3-part component to recovery, and that's purpose, community, and connection. And that's with all pathways and any pathway that one can choose. And I know that those 3 variables being active in my life from the time I wake, along with strong prayer and faith, have kept me very grounded and committed and anchored in what I'm able to do. And I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I'm a big believer in the 72-hour rule. I can be very accountable for my actions yesterday. I know what my intents and plans are for today and what my hopes for tomorrow are. And I know beyond that, if I get into that territory, it's not good.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. That reminds me of how many times, there are, for my own recovery, and then also individuals that I help, where we go to get help, we come back, and our family, sometimes the first question is, okay, do you have it this time? Are you done forever? You're never going to use again. And I remember I used to spend a lot of time trying to convince myself and them that, yeah, no, I'm committed. Well, the problem is in that moment, hook me up to a lie detector test. And yeah, I'm being honest, I never want to use again. The challenge is I can't predict the future, also can't put so much pressure on. And so I love that you highlighted that 72-hour focal point, because we don't have the ability to predict the future, but we do have the knowledge and the wisdom and the discernment to look forward and to know, like, okay, I can focus on today. I can be mindful of attempting to plan things for tomorrow, but be flexible if stuff comes up, because life happens. And like you said, be accountable for the day previous, and keeping it in a smaller bite instead of this humongous, accomplishment of a lifetime. It makes it more doable. And then we don't have that anxiety of pressure. And it's just about, what can I do today? So I love that. And you talked about another thing that's common. So as you were mentioning your journey, and that you were almost like a late bloomer as far as your substance use starting to affect your life in a negative way. So tell me a little bit about what that looks like, because it sounds like you left an unhealthy relationship to put distance between that addiction and yourself and your family. And then what was it that you started noticing that you had an issue with alcohol or substances?
Oh, it was brought to my attention. One of the things that you just said about when families ask if you've got it this time, the other part of the catalyst that got me into the field of recovery, transitioning from my prior career, was how active and involved my family was in my recovery. It absolutely has intergenerational impact. And my mother actually called CPS and took my kids. But she also ensured I was able to access treatment at the right time and continued to be a part of the rehabilitation, the whole process. It wasn't just me getting help. It was assured that everybody was going to get help. Having an alcoholic daughter and watching a mother not care for her. I was neglectful. I didn't deserve my children. I didn't. I was making poor choices. I was falling asleep much too early at night, and that meant blackout, not remembering what's going on. I know I drove with my children intoxicated. I put them in unsafe conditions. I was absent. I was physically present and 100% absent to children that needed me. And I have been a single sole provider since my daughter was almost 2.
Wow.
So my mother, I give immense credit to, holding boundaries, and understanding what that meant, because for somebody who doesn't ask for help, she went and asked and learned. And she really took to the concept that we really don't embrace anymore of enabling. But at the time, it was still a word that was utilized. But she got the concept. She got that she could help me and love me, whether or not I was active, but couldn't support me or be present when I was. And it was a very clear divide. And now I know in this work that I do, when I deal with family members, and we open that door and we get that my loved one needs help. It's okay. Well, what can we do for you too? Because you're a family member in recovery. And yes, you want your loved one to either, go to treatment or take advantage of the time that they're incarcerated. But this isn't vacation time for you. Like, now is the time for you to fully dive in, and start your own recovery program and understand how you can live simultaneous and fulfilling and happy, with your loved one when they're with you and when not, and how you can support them, but still maintain an independent life. And really, that's the beauty of what I experienced. I have two children that went to counseling. They came for every weekend while I was 59 days in a hospital setting rehabilitation center. They were there every Sunday with my grandmother, my mother, them, cookies for everybody on the wing. And whether people were actively detoxing or ready to be discharged, they were caring and compassionate and truly asked, how are you doing today? How are you feeling? So they got to see it wasn't just how substances impacted me. It was the universal and global effect that substances have on the human body, and to what extent, because it is a progressive disease. They also, because of the time that we're in, my drinking was really mid 2000s. And in the last 3 or 4 years, with the influx of fentanyl and tainted drug supply, we've all been able to witness, an evolution that we never saw coming. But my kids are making informed decisions. My mother nobody has to dance around me about whether or not they drink around me or anything else. My recovery is mine. And I keep it that way, but I'm also very transparent about it. I'm able to drop off my children at overnight events and tell other parents, like, look, I'll take the late run. Nobody has to worry. I'm the first one that you can call. I don't want anybody driving. We have very realistic expectations around whether or not. I don't ever want to scare somebody into not using, because then you get the people that, it's just, oh, yay, I'm free. And then it's too much, but I'm not going to condone it either. I'm going to be real about it. I'm going to understand things are just what they are. And kids do what they do and adults do what they do. And we're amongst a time that the challenges are unlike any that we've ever seen. So I love that recovery has really brought me and my family members to a place of non-judgment and complete radical inclusion and acceptance.
Yeah. I love that. And it's interesting too, because I know with the work that you're doing, you've already mentioned it a few times, that it's not just about helping people who are struggling with the addiction themselves, but it's the family members. And I've seen such a huge increase in the number of people that reach out to me in the last year that are family members. And I love how you were highlighting that, they want to know, what can I do to help my family member who's struggling with addiction? Tell me what to do for them. And it's like, wait a minute, first let's look at you, because this is really about you. And getting them that literature and the Courage to Change books and some, just some information so they can identify how it is in fact a family illness. And that if one person goes away, the person struggling with addiction goes away and gets help, but comes back to the same dynamic, and the rest of the family hasn't done work, that could be a setup for failure. And I love how you mentioned that sticking to setting boundaries and sticking to them. I can't say how many times in the last couple of months I've told family members, the key is for you to let your loved one know that there's nothing you won't do to help them as they journey into recovery. And there's nothing you will do to help them continue to use. And that's the key, because that there is no black and white answer for how do I know if I'm enabling my loved one, right? Like, you haven't probably seen that either. It's very case specific, dependent on the person and their situations. And at the end of the day, what one family member might do to support their loved one, if another one did in a different circumstance, they might be completely enabling, whereas this one may not be. So it can be a real fine balance of finding where should the boundary be set, and how do you get credibility where you don't keep kind of moving it a little bit. So then when you say to your adult child, well, no, you can't live here anymore. Well, you said that 200 times last year and I'm still here. So how are they going to know to believe you until you can be consistent? So it sounds like you had a wonderful family who was supportive, which is a huge blessing for people in recovery. And I love that they were bringing cookies to people who are at the same place as you. My family did that when I was in Teen Challenge. They would ship maple syrup to us in Philly, and some people there had never had real Vermont maple syrup, and they all loved it. So it sounds like your family loved you through the process. And what did it look like once you had completed the residential program and made your way back home? What did that look like?
Not anything that I would have thought. I will say it's very important to mention the aspect of time. I am an absolute product of a treatment system. I was held for 59 days in the hospital before I could go to the halfway house, and they had a bed open. And it wasn't for any other reason than the legal process required me to satisfy in family court full completion of a halfway house program in order to meet criteria to regain custody of my children. And I was done at rehab in the normal 14 days. It was, time to go and you can, get your bed ready. They knew more than I did. Thank God. And I was willing to listen because I meant it when I said I was asking for help and I would do anything. They got a scholarship and they held me there for those additional days because they knew if they had released me, I would have never shown up at that halfway house. I would have gone back to work. I probably would have relinquished custody of my children. I was separating from another terrible relationship with a lot of domestic abuse towards my children, a lot of psychological abuse, a lot of physical abuse, a lot of threatening behavior. And treatment was safe. But at the same time, it didn't leave me with a lot of options. I didn't know what I was doing because I couldn't go back to the career I had right away. And I knew I was getting ready to go out and I had all this support. But then people got scared, right? So we had deals, my mom and I, oh, you can have the kids back, as soon as you complete this program. Well, and then apprehension set in. And I heard things like, well, maybe we should wait a year, right? The game changer. I was working and running a comedy club and, just any cash job that I could take right out of rehab to get resources together because I was really upset that people get released from treatment without a job, without any kind of trajectory. And basically what I was seeing was the majority of folks were kind of given this cookie cutter approach of being dependent on social services and only being able to work this many hours. Like life had to fit into a criteria to maintain benefits. And I said, I just lost, I was in biopharmaceutical manufacturing. I had a 6-figure salary. I had a job. I had everything. And now you're telling me I can go to a women's shelter and go work at a convenience store? That's not acceptable. I worked for this. My children never had that life before this. This is a new opportunity. So I got all the information together about housing and where I could go to work and what I could do. And I was still sharing that at the outpatient treatment center that I was still attending while I was working these cash jobs, while I was garnering money to save to an apartment. I did get an administrative position. I went back to work. I completed day treatment, remained engaged with my fellowship and with my path of choice. That path has evolved over the years to beautiful things that are more inclusive. But I really saw an opportunity, and that's when I went with both feet in very early in recovery, with not even a year, and said my career path is going to be in peer-based recovery and advocating and helping other women who are, survivors of domestic violence and survivors of addiction and alcoholism and every social determinant of life. And, relationships are great, but I'm 2 funerals and a divorce in. I don't have the best picker, and I know for me, I need to do more work before I can have somebody involved in my life that's an asset and not another dependent or somebody that I'm prioritizing over a job or my children or myself. Right now, my kids are my world. And, I, for almost a year and a half, was not with them on the daily because I was getting better. COVID has brought many double-edged swords, many mixed blessings. The time that I have been graced with my children at this age and being teens and being in Vermont and being where we can breathe and have space and share time and make memories is just, I mean, that is a gift of recovery.
I love how you say that too. I've noticed that and experienced with COVID. Obviously, there's so many aspects of it that feel foreign and uncomfortable and scary. And yet we have that option of also looking at the blessings that have come out of it and the amount of time that we've been able to connect with the people that we love, the amount of time to connect with ourselves. And I know for me, I tend to be an overdoer, shocker. And I burn out sometimes, and that affects my health. And there's concern by family around. And it's like, I realize what works for me is when I remind myself that by taking that time to stay balanced, focused, self-care, and do my prayer, meditation, and all of these things that I've had to do daily for years to stay functional, that it's not, sometimes I think, well, it's selfish if I take too much self-care time because there's so many people that need help. So let me help them and then I'll get back to it. And it's that same philosophy when you are on a plane. If something happens, you secure your own oxygen mask instead of those next to you. And the first time I heard that, I thought, like, how selfish is that? I would never do that. If there's a elderly person or a kid, I'm going to make sure they're all set. And but the challenge is like, we can't help others without making sure that we're healthy ourselves, and having that downtime to be able to focus on what works for us in order to be our best self for others is critical. So it really, I feel like I could talk to you forever, and I know we're at the, coming to the end of our time, Fawn. I want to thank you first off for sharing your journey and sharing what I'm hearing are the challenges, the benefits of focusing on your recovery and putting that before everything, and the blessings you have in your life today. And if you want to give me just another minute's worth of what's something that you want listeners to know when it comes to recovery.
I want listeners to know that we have not even mentioned Vermont Recovery Network talking about my personal journey. So I'm glad that we have some time to discuss that. Vermont Recovery Network supports the 12 peer-based recovery centers across the state. We are absolutely privileged to work beside the people that are out, available, and willing to help. Help is everywhere that you look. Recovery really is welcome here. And we want that message spread more and more. So whether it's a family member, somebody questioning their use, somebody that knows that they need help, the peer route in it, whether or not treatment ends, treatment's great. And a lot of people need it, but there's wait times and units of service. But with peer-based recovery, you can go when you're pre-contemplative, you can go when you're thinking about things. It's a place to go while you're waiting for treatment. Most importantly, it's the place to continue afterwards. Recovery doesn't end. I wake up and volunteer to be in recovery and really enjoy it every day. And I hope that other people catch that bug and spirit. There's 12 recovery centers throughout Vermont, and there are a number of people who have lived this life, family members and individuals that are absolutely just waiting to take your call.
Thank you so much, Fawn. You are such a rock star. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. Thank you to everybody who watched. I hope that people did take note of the many paths to recovery, the options, and reach out to the Vermont Recovery Network. We thank you, we love you, and we'll see you next time on Recovery Rockstar.